What if the person you discarded, the one you called dull and forgettable, turned out to be a gem? This is the astonishing story of Gregory Knox, a multimillionaire who publicly belittled his quiet wife Eleanor, pushing her aside in pursuit of a flashier existence. He believed he had it all: wealth, influence, and the perfect trophy partner to replace the one he left behind. But months later, everything crumbled as he sat transfixed before his television screen. There, on national broadcast, was a woman he once tossed aside, utterly transformed. She was no longer the wife he deemed unremarkable. She was now the global face of a high-end fashion empire, commanding the attention of millions. This isn't just a tale of heartbreak. It's a saga of cruel betrayal, hidden strength, and ultimate revenge played out on a global stage. The collapse wasn't sudden. It came slowly, creeping like rot through the hollow corridors of the marble-floored estate Gregory called home. From the outside, the Knox residence in the affluent hills of Bel Air, California, was a modern masterpiece, an expansive estate of gleaming glass and stone. It looked out across the Pacific Ocean, its tiered gardens sloping gently toward a private helipad and a moored luxury catamaran named the Astra. Inside, though, the air was cold and sterile, like the conversations between Gregory and his wife Eleanor. Gregory Knox was a product of Silicon Valley. At 47, he possessed the sharp, polished confidence that only extreme wealth could buy. His suits were Ermenegildo Zegna, his watches were Richard Mille. His drive? Unrelenting. He had built his tech investment firm, Knox Venture Holdings, from scratch, flipping an inheritance into a multi-billion-dollar juggernaut through a string of aggressive acquisitions. He viewed life as a strategic game, where every person and every move had a purpose. For 20 years, Eleanor had been his queen, a gentle, constant figure by his side. But queens, he was beginning to believe, could be replaced. Eleanor Knox, née Winslow, was grace embodied. At 44, she maintained the soft, timeless beauty of her youth. Delicate features, warm gray eyes, and chestnut hair she wore in a classic chignon. She was the calm to Gregory's storm, the silent rhythm behind his blaring march. She had run their homes with serene precision. The Bel Air mansion, the Manhattan penthouse, the Lac Como villa. She raised their 2 children, now in elite international boarding schools, with a steady hand. She hosted elegant dinners, impressed investors with quiet charm, and appeared beside Gregory at endless fundraising galas with her practiced, peaceful smile. By every measure, she was the model executive wife. And that was the problem. The decay began in the quiet. It crept into the stillness between them on their California king bed, a divide as vast as the Pacific. It thrived in the perfunctory kisses exchanged at bedtime. Their conversations skimmed the surface like pebbles skipping across water, never sinking deeper. Gregory had changed, or maybe he had simply revealed who he had always been. Only the chase thrilled him now. The deal-making, the rush of competition. Everything else faded to monotony. His life blurred into a carousel of chartered flights, high-stakes summits in Singapore, champagne-soaked galas in Saint-Tropez. He was encircled by brilliance, models with sculpted cheekbones, tech visionaries with game-changing platforms, European heirs with old blood and modern appetites. And when he came home, there was Eleanor. Eleanor, who preferred Darjeeling tea over Dom Perignon. Eleanor, whose idea of excitement was a biography and a wool blanket beside the fire. Eleanor, who asked about his day, her eyes clouding over as he spoke of venture capital structures and equity dilution, concepts as remote to her as hieroglyphics. He didn't see a partner anymore. He saw a remnant, an echo from a chapter long closed. He began to feel it in his gut, the slow churn of irritation when she greeted him in slippers instead of heels, when her scent was lavender and old books instead of designer musk. It wasn't that she lacked beauty, she simply no longer reflected the storm inside him. Her peace unnerved him. Her steadiness, once his sanctuary, now felt like inertia. There were moments when he watched her across the dinner table, spooning soup in contemplative silence, and wondered who she might have been if she had never married him. Then he would look away, because the question frightened him. She was the woman he had married when he was lean and hungry, still clawing his way up. Now he was a king, and he needed a queen whose brilliance matched the crown he wore. That final catalyst came in the form of a woman named Sabine Dufour. She was the Paris-born creative director of a luxury brand his firm was evaluating for acquisition. Sabine was everything Eleanor wasn't. Bold, cunning, oozing an unfiltered allure. She pushed back. She debated him on culture and currency, looked him in the eyes with a hunger that met his own. She didn't see him as a wallet. She saw him as a wolf, an equal. Her fire only made Eleanor's serenity feel like frost. He began seeing Eleanor through Sabine's imagined lens, and all he saw was dullness. He turned callous in increments. He'd snicker at her minimalist dress at black tie functions. "Darling, did you pull that from the PTA fundraiser bin?" he'd whisper, just loud enough for nearby ears. He mocked her interests. "Another dusty book about ancient empires? Riveting," he'd mutter with an exaggerated sigh. Dinners at home ceased. Instead came abrupt texts about delays, meetings, obligations. Both knew they were lies. Eleanor met each cruelty with unshaken calm, a composed strength that only infuriated him more. She never lashed out, never raised her voice, never threw his affairs in his face. She would simply meet his gaze with those steady, knowing eyes, always calm, always seeing more than she should. There was hurt there, buried deep, but it was her quiet understanding that unnerved him most. It was as if she could see the hollow core he was becoming. That silent truth was more damning than any boardroom betrayal. And then came the day he ended it. It was a Tuesday in October, the sky clear and sharp. The leaves blazed in gold and scarlet across the Bel Air hills, a final flourish of beauty before winter. Inside their glass-walled conservatory, Eleanor was misting her orchids, her touch delicate. She wore a soft cashmere sweater and worn jeans. No makeup, no jewelry, just simplicity. To Gregory, it looked domestic, wholesome, and somehow that felt like an insult. He entered, the echo of his custom leather soles snapping across the flagstone. No greeting, no warmth. "Eleanor, we need to talk." She turned with a small smile, maybe thinking he'd come home early for her. The smile vanished the moment she read his face. It was the same expression he wore when eliminating a CEO, calculating final, utterly emotionless. "I want a divorce," he said. The words sat heavy in the room, wrapped in the floral scent and damp earth. Eleanor didn't cry, didn't flinch. She just stood there, misting bottle still in hand, her complexion paling ever so slightly. "I see," she said softly. That composure, still unbroken, was too much for him. He wanted impact, wanted control. He wanted to see her shattered. "Let's be honest, Eleanor," he began, slipping into that clipped, condescending tone he used on failing executives. "This hasn't been working for a long time. We've grown apart. We want different things." "What is it you want, Gregory?" she asked, her voice level. "I want a life," he snapped, gesturing broadly at the sun-drenched luxury around them. "A real life, not this quiet, sterile, boring existence." There it was, his favorite weapon finally spoken aloud. The word sharp, bitter, unmistakable. "You think I'm boring," she said. It wasn't a question. "I don't think it," he said, pacing now, feeding off his own cruelty. "I know it. My life is moving at 1,000 miles an hour. I'm building an empire. I need a partner, an equal, someone who understands my world. Someone who can keep up." Sabine. He caught himself, but too late. The name hung in the air. Eleanor's eyes flickered, just for a second, the first visible crack in her composure. "Yes," Gregory said, latching onto it. "Sabine is alive. She has fire. She's not content to sit on the sidelines and arrange flowers." He gestured toward her beloved orchids, his hand dismissive, almost cruel. The motion stung more than any words. He expected her to flinch, to crumple, to finally show the fragility he had always projected onto her. He thought she'd collapse under the weight of rejection, of replacement. But instead she held steady. Her breath didn't hitch, her shoulders didn't sag, her silence was not submission, it was judgment. And that scared him more than anything. He waited for tears, for begging. But there was none. Eleanor set the misting bottle down with slow precision. She stood taller, and for the first time something flared in her eyes, something sharper than pain or patience. It was steel. Cold. Ancient. 20 years, Gregory, she said, her voice low and deadly calm. For 20 years, I've been the foundation of the empire you love so much. I hosted the dinners that sealed your deals. I raised the children you barely remembered to call. I built the calm, boring life you came home to when your thrilling world became too much. I made the silence so you could roar. Don't act like some martyr, he sneered. You lived in luxury most people can't even imagine. I lived in a gilded cage, she replied quietly, and I stayed there because I loved the man I thought I married. But that man, he's long gone, if he ever existed at all. She looked at him then, really looked at him, and something in that gaze cut deep. It felt like she was peeling back the layers of his custom-tailored armor, seeing the small, fearful man buried underneath. In that moment, he felt naked. Her gaze didn't accuse, it revealed. As though she held a mirror to everything he had become, a man who mistook glitter for worth and noise for love. The lawyers will be in touch, he said, turning to go. He was eager to escape that stare. I'll be generous. You'll be taken care of. I don't want your money, Gregory. That stopped him. He turned, incredulous. What? The house? The cars? The investments? You can keep it all, she said. I want just one thing. What's that? He asked, a smirk already tugging at his mouth, expecting some sentimental request. My freedom, she said, and my name. I will no longer be Eleanor Knox. I'll be Eleanor Winslow again. I want you to erase me from your life as cleanly as you clearly want me gone. A laugh burst out of him then, mocking, disbelieving. The idiot, he thought. She was walking away from millions, from status, from the name he'd given her. It was all the proof he needed of how unambitious she really was. Fine, he said with a dismissive shrug. Have it your way, Eleanor. Be whoever you think you are. Just don't come crawling back when you realize how cold it is out there without my protection. He walked out of the conservatory without a backward glance, leaving her alone among her orchids. As the door closed behind him, Gregory felt a rush, exhilaration, liberation. The final, tedious chain had been broken. He was free, free to chase the life he deserved, with the dazzling woman who matched his new world. He was Gregory Knox, and the future was his to claim. What he didn't know was that the woman he had cast aside wasn't some sheltered housewife. She was a rare bloom, one that was about to flourish in a way no one, least of all him, could have predicted. And the world she was about to enter would make his empire seem small, outdated, and painfully, ironically dull. The silence that settled after Gregory's exit was overwhelming. Not the cold stillness that had haunted their marriage, but something heavier. A void. A vacuum. An erasure of identity. For 24 hours, Eleanor didn't move from the conservatory. She remained on the wrought iron bench, hands folded in her lap, watching the shifting light as the sun made its arc across the sky. Outside, the autumn trees blazed in crimson and amber, mocking the gray fog of numbness that clung to her. Gregory's words echoed in the emptiness, boring, sterile, obsolete. Each one struck like a stone, and Eleanor felt them stack upon her chest, pressing the breath from her body. She had devoted her entire adulthood to being his wife. It wasn't just a role. It had been her whole identity. She had buried her own dreams, quieted her own voice, shelved her own ambition for so long that now, she wasn't sure who Eleanor Winslow even was, or if that woman had ever really existed beyond the name. The household staff, who for years had moved through the estate like background music, now drifted uncertainly. No one knew what to say or do. On the second morning, it was Mrs. Hadley, the housekeeper, who finally stepped into the conservatory. She had been with them for over a decade. Sharp-eyed but fair, always professional. She entered holding a silver tray, balancing a porcelain teapot and a single teacup. "Ma'am," she said gently, voice strained with concern. "You need to have something." Eleanor lifted her head. Her gaze was distant, unfocused. She stared at the cup. Its delicate floral pattern. It was from the Royal Doulton set they'd received as a wedding gift 20 years earlier. A wave of nausea hit her. A sharp, violent wave rushed through her. It was all part of the trap, the beautiful, meticulously constructed trap. "Take it away, Martha," Eleanor said, her voice hoarse. "Please, take it all away." Mrs. Hadley hesitated, confused. "Ma'am?" "All of it," Eleanor clarified. There was a strange electric energy building under her skin. "The china, the silver, the crystal. Pack it up. Donate it. I don't want to see a single piece of it again." That moment was the first fissure in the wall she had kept up for decades. It was the first choice she had made for herself in longer than she could remember. And it had nothing to do with seating arrangements or dinner menus. It surged through her like a live current. In the days that followed, the numbness began to fracture. Emotion returned, not in quiet whispers, but in roaring waves. Feelings she had kept buried for over 20 years came clawing back to the surface. Grief, raw and consuming, would seize her in ambush. Once, she stumbled upon one of Gregory's old sweaters in a forgotten closet. The scent of his cologne, something that had once felt like safety, triggered a sob so fierce she collapsed to the floor, shaking. But buried beneath the grief was something else. Anger. Pure, righteous, white-hot rage. How dare he? How dare he take the best years of her life? Years she gave freely, building a home, raising children, supporting his empire, and treat them like a failed investment. How dare he call her boring when she had been the quiet architect behind every inch of the life he flaunted? Gregory had made his decision. That much was clear. His attorneys, sharks from a top Beverly Hills law firm, delivered the divorce papers by courier. The documents were cold, meticulous, void of sentiment. And just as he promised, they were generous. The settlement included the Bel Air estate, a lump sum large enough to secure her for life, and an astronomical monthly alimony. It was a payoff, a silencing gift, a bribe to ensure her disappearance. Eleanor sat at the massive rosewood desk in Gregory's vacated office, the paperwork spread before her like battlefield debris. She picked up the fountain pen he had left behind, a Mont Blanc that probably cost more than her first car. Her eyes landed on the signature line, Eleanor Knox. A slow, sharp smile tugged at her lips, not the polite smile she'd worn for years, but something with steel behind it. She uncapped the pen and, in steady strokes, crossed out the entire settlement section. In its place, she wrote a single, uncompromising sentence. As agreed, I waive all claims to marital assets, property, and alimony. Then she signed her name. Not as Eleanor Knox. She signed the papers for the first time in 20 years as Eleanor Winslow. She sent them back through regular mail, not courier. No velvet envelope. No urgency. The simplicity of it felt profound, like peeling away a diamond-studded layer of suffocation. Naturally, Gregory's legal team called within hours. Their voices were tight, stunned, half accusatory. Was she ill? Was someone coercing her? Did she understand what she was surrendering? I understand perfectly, Eleanor said calmly to the senior partner, a man named Mr. Aldridge, whom she had personally entertained at a dozen dinner parties. I'm of sound mind. No one is forcing me. I want nothing. Please proceed with the divorce exactly as I've outlined. She knew the message would make its way to Gregory, and she knew exactly how he'd take it. He'd think it was naive, weak, pathetic. He would never grasp that letting go of his empire was the only way she could reclaim her soul. He didn't have a word for that kind of liberation. It wasn't part of his vocabulary. To him, power was currency, and she had just declared herself bankrupt by choice. But to Eleanor, it felt like the first honest transaction she had ever made. Her first breath of freedom tasted like panic. She had almost nothing in her name, just a tiny savings account she'd opened before the marriage. It held a few $1,000s, forgotten and untouched for decades. On the day the divorce was finalized, she packed a single suitcase. No gowns, no diamonds, no heirloom pearls, just the simple silver locket her grandmother once gave her. Each item she left behind felt like the shedding of a former life. She moved quietly, but with intention, no regrets, no hesitation, just the subtle ache of release. She walked through the grand, echoing marble foyer of the mansion for the last time. Mrs. Hadley and the remaining staff stood near the staircase, quietly heartbroken. "Where will you go, ma'am?" Mrs. Hadley asked, eyes brimming. "I don't know yet," Eleanor answered, and the raw honesty of it made her heart stutter with both fear and thrill. "But I'm going forward." She didn't take a private car. She called a local taxi. As the cab pulled past the wrought iron gates, she didn't glance back. She went to a modest hotel in Santa Monica, so far from the life she once lived it felt like another universe. The wallpaper curled at the edges. The bathroom door creaked. Her view overlooked a tired parking lot and a dumpster. It was the most beautiful place she had ever stayed, not because of what it offered, but because of what it didn't. No expectations, no performance, no mirrors reflecting someone else's dreams, just space and silence. And her. For the first time, Eleanor Winslow was truly alone, and in that stillness, something stirred. Before Gregory, before the cage, there had been another Eleanor, a whip-smart, multilingual woman, fluent in 4 languages, fascinated by art and history, summa cum laude graduate, once bound for graduate study in Florence. Before she met the charming, obsessive young investor who promised her the world, and gave her a version of it, one that required giving up her own. One night, scrolling listlessly on a new, no-name laptop she'd picked up secondhand, Eleanor stumbled across an article. It was an article about the challenges heritage luxury brands faced in resonating with younger audiences. One brand stood out in particular, an iconic French perfumer, Lumière, long celebrated for its timeless scents. Once a symbol of sophistication, it had now become a punchline, something your grandmother might wear. Lumière was based in Paris, a city Eleanor hadn't set foot in since her honeymoon. That word alone tugged loose an old memory. A much younger Eleanor, backpacking through Europe, standing awestruck outside the original Lumière boutique on Place Vendôme. She'd been captivated by the brand's backstory. Founded in the 1920s by a rebellious woman who defied every expectation. That woman, Colette Marchand, had been more than a perfumer. She was a dreamweaver, a trailblazer. She didn't just sell fragrance, she sold a vision of Parisian elegance wrapped in rebellion. Eleanor spiraled into research. She read every article, devoured every piece of history about Lumière, including their recent decline. The company had faltered in a world ruled by celebrity influencers and viral campaigns. Their message was diluted. Their image, dusty. The CEO, Jean-Luc Marchand, Colette's grandson, was a traditionalist lost in a modern landscape. Sales were falling fast. The brand was, in one word, boring. And that's when something stirred. She wasn't Mrs. Gregory Knox, the smiling hostess. She was Eleanor Winslow, a scholar, a linguist, a strategist. Gregory had called her boring because she valued nuance, culture, and legacy, concepts he could never grasp. But what if that wasn't a flaw? What if it was her superpower? She saw clearly why Lumière was floundering. They had lost their voice. They were selling perfume instead of a legacy. They were chasing the shallow glow of trends instead of leaning into their deep, rich identity. What they needed wasn't a rebrand. They needed a resurrection. They needed someone fluent in the language of legacy. Someone who could see history not as a burden, but as an untapped power. Someone who knew how to make a brand feel timeless and current. A wild, impossible idea began to take root. She was middle-aged, divorced, out of the workforce for 20 years. No resume, no LinkedIn, no glossy PR connections, but she had something else. Nothing to lose. She opened her laptop and pulled up a blank document. She didn't write a cover letter, she wrote a story. The story of Lumière, as she saw it. She wrote about Colette Marchand, about jazz-era Paris, about what it meant to wear history on your skin. She didn't pitch a product. She wrote a manifesto, a vision, a love letter to a forgotten identity. She dissected the brand's missteps with the clarity of someone who once critiqued Gothic architecture with surgical precision. And then, she offered a roadmap, how to reclaim Lumière's soul. Not by changing it, but by waking it back up. She spent the week consumed by it, writing late into the night in her cramped hotel room, fueled by stale vending machine coffee and something deeper. A sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. When it was done, she had crafted a 50-page proposal. It was bold, visionary, personal. She found Jean-Luc Marchand's email through a business directory. Her hand trembled slightly as she attached the document. She typed a simple subject line, "The Soul of Lumière," and hit send. She expected nothing in return. It was a shot in the dark, desperate maybe, but it was hers. And the moment she sent it, Eleanor Winslow felt the last trace of Gregory Knox's shadow dissolve. She wasn't a discarded wife anymore. She was a contender, entering the arena on her own terms. While Eleanor was reinventing herself in a quiet Santa Monica hotel room, Gregory Knox was busy celebrating his supposed rebirth. He and Sabine had quickly become the darlings of Manhattan's elite. Their faces were fixtures at every gala and private auction. Society pages dubbed them the next power duo, her Parisian accent and high-fashion presence the perfect complement to his aggressive boardroom charisma. Gregory felt unstoppable. He had shed his bland domestic past and emerged as the man he always believed he was meant to be. He barely thought of Eleanor, and when he did, it was with a sort of patronizing pity. He pictured her wandering the Bel Air mansion, still clinging to her orchids, slowly fading into irrelevance. When he heard she had turned down the entire divorce settlement, it irritated him briefly. He'd chalked it up to martyrdom, a final, pitiful gesture meant to prove something. Her loss, he'd said to Sabine, refilling their glasses with vintage champagne before raising a toast to freedom. His world was saturated with stimulation, events, press, ambition. The quiet he'd left behind, ancient history. But sometimes in the middle of the night, when the after-party faded and Sabine slept quietly beside him, an emptiness slipped through the cracks. And in those still moments, he missed it. He missed her. The way Eleanor made his mornings smell like Earl Grey. The way she knew precisely how crisp he liked his toast. The calm, the unspoken rhythm. The quiet, infuriating sense of being known. Those feelings, whatever had once existed between them, surfaced only in fleeting, intrusive moments. Gregory swiftly buried them beneath thoughts of his next acquisition or a spontaneous yacht weekend off the Amalfi Coast. He was Gregory Knox, and Gregory Knox didn't do nostalgia. 3 weeks after Eleanor hit send on her audacious email, her cheap prepaid phone buzzed on the nightstand of her modest hotel room. The caller ID showed an international number. France. Her heart kicked against her ribs. She picked up, her voice trembling slightly. "Hello? May I speak with Eleanor Winslow?" The voice was male, smooth, rich, with a Parisian lilt. "This is she managed. "Miss Winslow, this is Jean-Luc Marchand." She shot upright in bed, heart racing. It was him, the CEO of Lumiere. "Monsieur Marchand," she said, trying to steady her voice. "Thank you for calling." "No, Miss Winslow," he replied warmly. "It is I who must thank you." His tone carried urgency and something else, gratitude. "I have read your proposal 3 times. You have seen into the very soul of my family's company. You see what my own executives have missed for years. You see the ghost of my grandmother Colette in the gears of this machine. It is remarkable." Eleanor was stunned. "I have a proposition," he continued. "It is unconventional, yes. But these are critical times. I want you to come to Paris. I want you to work with us. Not as a distant advisor. I want you to lead this. I intend to create a role just for you, ambassador of the brand. You will be the face and voice of Lumiere's rebirth." The offer was so beyond the scope of her imagination that she almost laughed out loud. Ambassador of the brand, her. A middle-aged, divorced woman from Bel Air, formerly Greenwich, who had spent the last 2 decades managing charity dinners and boarding school calendars. "Monsieur Marchand," she began cautiously, "I feel I must tell you my resume. It has a 20-year gap." "I am not hiring a resume, Miss Winslow," he said firmly. "I am hiring a vision." "I'm hiring the woman who wrote those 50 pages, Jean-Luc said. "That woman understands luxury, heritage, and storytelling better than anyone I've ever encountered. Can you be in Paris by next week? We'll take care of everything." 1 week later, Eleanor Winslow stepped out of a taxi and onto Place Vendôme. The gray Parisian sky, the curved windows of the buildings, it all felt achingly familiar. But this time she wasn't just a visitor pressing her face to the glass. She belonged here. She had purpose. Lumiere had arranged a chic apartment for her in Le Marais, a world away from the bare-bones hotel in Santa Monica. But it wasn't the elegance or designer finishes that thrilled her most. It was the authenticity. It was the quiet beauty. It felt like a home, not a cage. Her first in-person meeting with Jean-Luc Marchand confirmed everything she'd hoped. He was in his late 50s, with weary eyes and a passionate soul, caught in the impossible dance of honoring his grandmother's vision while trying to steer an aging bird through the chaos of modern trends. He had felt like a museum curator. Until Eleanor arrived. She had shown him how to make the art breathe again. "You have full creative freedom," he told her simply. "Show us the way." And she did. The reserved, quiet woman who once tiptoed through her own home was gone. In her place stood a strategist, sharp, articulate, and certain. She immersed herself in Lumiere's archives. She read every journal Colette Marchand had written, traced every fragrance, held the original, hand-blown bottles like relics. She inhaled the soul of the brand, the steel she had discovered during her break from Gregory. It had always been there. She had just forgotten how to wield it. She didn't begin with a celebrity splash. She began with a story. Working alongside the master perfumers, she revived one of Colette's never-released 1920s formulas, a bold, layered fragrance of night-blooming jasmine and smoky leather. They named it Eau d'Audace, water of boldness. Then came the launch, not a circus of influencers, but an intimate, invite-only evening at the Musée Rodin. They didn't invite anyone famous just for being famous. Instead, they welcomed artists, authors, historians, and entrepreneurs, women of substance from across the globe. And Eleanor hosted it. She had transformed, inside and out. With guidance from the Lumiere stylist team, she curated a look that wasn't a costume, it was her. She cut her hair into a sleek jaw-length bob. Her clothes no longer whispered safety, they spoke identity. Elegance, strength, a sharp Lanvin tuxedo jacket, a flowing Chloe blouse, a flawlessly tailored Dior dress. The clothes didn't wear her. She inhabited them. The grace she had always carried was still there, but now it glowed with confidence. The stillness Gregory once mistook for dullness, it had never been dull. It was power held steady. She took the stage and spoke for 10 minutes. Flawless French, no notes. She didn't mention market share or consumer demographics. She told a story. The story of Colette Marchand, a woman who built a fragrance empire with nothing but intuition, courage, and her extraordinary sense of scent. It was a story about audacity, about reclaiming one's own narrative. Eleanor wove the legacy of Lumiere with a modern message of empowerment. She wasn't selling perfume. She was offering a philosophy. She was luminous, articulate, magnetic. The event was an overwhelming success, not because of viral hashtags or paid influencers, but because of authenticity. The story spread fast. Vogue Paris, Le Monde, and the Financial Times all published glowing pieces about Lumiere's soulful reawakening. And at the center of every headline, Eleanor Winslow, the mysterious, graceful woman who had seemingly emerged from nowhere to resurrect a sleeping legend. Her life became a whirlwind. She traveled across Europe, Milan, London, Geneva, hosting salons, appearing in interviews, becoming the very embodiment of the brand's new essence. Timeless elegance with a sharp, intellectual edge. She was working harder than she ever had in her life, and she had never felt more alive. The emptiness that once echoed through her grand home was now filled with something else. Purpose, creativity, fulfillment. She wasn't a reflection of someone else's success anymore. She was the light. She sent her children postcards from every city. The divorce had shaken them at first, but through long, honest conversations over video calls, she didn't just explain what had happened. She explained who she was becoming. And for the first time, they saw her not just as mom, but as a full, complex woman. Their pride in her became one of the greatest joys of her new life. One evening, sitting on the balcony of her Paris apartment, a glass of Sancerre in hand, she thought of Gregory, not with rage, not with pain, just a kind of soft, distant pity. A man who had everything, but saw so little. He had held a raw diamond in his hand, and because it was uncut, he mistook it for gravel and cast it aside. She lifted her glass, to Paris, to her future, to Eleanor Winslow. The Renaissance was complete. Now the world would take notice. Back in New York, Gregory Knox told himself he was still on top. The acquisition of Sabine's fashion house was complete. It was being hailed as another masterstroke by Knox Capital. He and Sabine had just returned from a week in St. Barth's. Beach parties, paparazzi, sunset cruises aboard the Legacy. Yet the emptiness lingered. A low, constant hum beneath the roar of Gregory's outward success. A silent discontent that refused to be drowned out by headlines or champagne. Sabine, as he was discovering, burned bright. But her fire was costly. What had once felt like intoxicating passion now felt like obligation. Her ambition, once thrillingly aligned with his, had become adversarial. They no longer shared ideas. They negotiated them. Her effortless glamour? It took a small army and a massive expense account to maintain. Not that he couldn't afford it. But it didn't feel romantic anymore. It felt transactional. And more, he found himself craving something he had once tried so hard to escape. Quiet. Stability. Grace. He thought of Eleanor at odd moments. A woman's silhouette across the street, a soft laugh in a quiet restaurant, the scent of tea leaves in a boutique. It would hit him like a spark, sharp and sudden, before his mind caught up and corrected him. He had once called her boring, but now he saw what he had never understood. What he had dismissed as dullness was actually something he had never possessed, an unshakable core. A self. Eleanor had always known who she was. He, despite all his victories, still didn't. And the thought of that haunted him. So he buried it, deeper, partied harder, worked longer, louder. Then everything changed. It was a rainy Tuesday night in November. He was alone in the media room of his Park Avenue penthouse, a cavernous space with a wall-sized screen and cold designer furniture. Sabine was at some industry gala. He hadn't wanted to go. With a tumbler of Macallan 25 in his hand, he flipped through channels, irritated, restless. He stopped on a business network doing a special, Titans of Tradition. It was a series on heritage brands reviving their legacies. He watched idly as the segment moved through classic automakers and luxury watch companies. Then the screen shifted. That unmistakable pearlescent logo filled the frame. Lumiere. But perhaps the most astonishing turnaround story this year, the anchor said brightly, comes from the world of French perfumery. Gregory leaned forward, mildly curious. The historic house of Lumiere, once seen as a brand of the past, has reported over 40% growth this quarter. The shift has been called one of the most brilliant rebranding campaigns in recent luxury history. He grunted. Good for them, he muttered, raising his glass. The campaign, the anchor continued, is the vision of their new and famously private brand ambassador, a woman who has become every bit as iconic as the fragrance she represents. A clip began to play. The camera panned across a grand sitting room, opulent but refined. A woman sat poised in a velvet armchair, the glow of warm light surrounding her. The backdrop looked like the library of a five-star London hotel. She was the embodiment of elegance. Wearing a cream silk blouse and tailored black trousers, her golden hair styled into a sharp, sophisticated bob, she radiated poise. Her smile was warm, yet quietly commanding. Her posture serene and self-assured. She was speaking with the interviewer, her voice intelligent and vibrant, fully present. Gregory froze. The glass of scotch hovered mid-air, forgotten in his hand. His heart gave a violent jolt, like it had been physically struck. The color drained from his face. It couldn't be. But it was Eleanor. His Eleanor. But transformed, unfamiliar and utterly captivating. He recognized the face, but not the energy. The quiet, deferential softness he remembered had been replaced with something magnetic. Her voice, once gently accommodating, now rang out with clarity and composure. I believe authenticity is the new luxury, she was saying. Today's consumer isn't looking for trends. They want connection. They want a story. Something that resonates, something with soul. Lumiere doesn't sell just a fragrance. We offer memory, history, a vision of enduring, intelligent beauty. That's not something we need to manufacture. It's something we simply need to remember. The interviewer leaned in, visibly enthralled. They're calling you the Pearl of Paris. You've come out of nowhere. Everyone wants to know, who is Eleanor Winslow? Eleanor smiled, a calm, knowing smile that sent a chill down Gregory's spine. It wasn't the smile he remembered, the sweet, careful smile designed to keep the peace. It was something else, a quiet declaration. I'm a woman who believes in the power of a good story, she said simply. Her hazel eyes sparkled. And I've only just begun telling mine. The glass slipped from his hand. It shattered against the hardwood, the scotch and shards of crystal exploding across the floor, just like his composure. He couldn't move. He stumbled forward, pressing both hands against the cold surface of the television, desperate to confirm what he was seeing. As if he could reach through it and touch her. Eleanor Winslow. She had reclaimed her name. Boring. The word ricocheted inside his skull. It used to be his insult. Now it mocked him. Because the woman on that screen was anything but boring. She was dazzling, intelligent, powerful. She was a star. And Gregory Knox, the kingmaker, had thrown her away like refuse. A frantic, uncontrollable energy seized him. For the first time in his life, fear replaced adrenaline. His chest tightened, not with excitement, but with panic. He was unmoored, untethered from the corporate identity that had always defined him. Gregory scrambled for his laptop, his fingers trembling so violently he could barely type. He searched. Eleanor Winslow Lumiere. His screen exploded with results. Dozens of articles from Vogue, Forbes, The Wall Street Journal, from every corner of the business and fashion world. Photographs filled the screen. Eleanor stepping out of a car at Paris Fashion Week, poised and impossibly elegant. Eleanor on stage in Geneva, captivating an international audience. Eleanor walking beside Jean-Luc Marchand, the two of them smiling with effortless camaraderie. Gregory read every word. His face hardened with disbelief and something else. Horror. He read about the 50-page manifesto, the one that had redefined an entire brand. He read praise upon praise for her brilliance, for her vision, for the fearless way she'd resurrected a legend. And over again, he saw his own words, his insults reflected back at him. They had once called Lumiere outdated, a relic, boring. The exact words he had once used to describe her. Eleanor had taken every quality he had mocked, her depth, her thoughtfulness, her quietude, and turned them into a global success, a multi-million-dollar empire built on the very foundation he had cast aside. When Sabine returned an hour later, she found him sitting in the dark. The broken glass still littered the floor. The TV was paused, Eleanor's smiling face frozen in perfect clarity on the screen. "Gregory?" she asked, irritation slipping into her voice. "What happened? Did you fall or something?" He looked up at her, at the heavy makeup, the curated outfit, the icy precision, and for the first time he saw her for what she was. Hollow. Glamorous, yes, but hollow. He had traded a diamond for a shard of glass. "My wife," he whispered. "I saw my wife on television." Sabine frowned. "Your ex-wife, the boring one?" She gave a derisive laugh. "Did she win the lottery or something?" Gregory flinched like she'd struck him. "Don't call her that," he said, his voice quiet but edged with steel. He turned the TV back on. He played the clip again. Sabine watched in silence. Her sculpted eyebrows slowly rose. Her jaw dropped slightly. She saw it. Even she couldn't deny it. Power, presence, prestige. Eleanor radiated all of it. Sabine glanced at Gregory's pale, hollow expression. A flash of unease flickered across her face, followed swiftly by defensive anger. "Well," she said sharply, "she cleans up all right." But it didn't matter. Gregory wasn't listening anymore. He was staring at the screen, at the woman he had dismissed, belittled, abandoned, and now all he wanted was to speak to her. To understand, to undo what couldn't be undone. He drafted an email, clumsy, pitiful. "Saw you on TV, you look good, we should talk." He hit send, heart pounding, and waited. Days passed, no reply. The silence was deafening, louder than any insult, louder than any confrontation. Gregory was used to being answered, immediately, obediently. The lack of response was unmistakable and deliberate. It was a power play, and he knew it. He wasn't in control anymore. He tried calling Lumiere's headquarters in Paris, asking to be transferred to Eleanor Winslow. A polite but firm assistant responded, "Miss Winslow's schedule is fully committed at this time. May I take a message?" Gregory paused, then muttered, "Just tell her Gregory Knox called." The name, once a skeleton key to every door, now felt like dead weight. He knew she received the messages, and he knew she was ignoring him. The realization spread through him slowly, an acidic, agonizing burn. He, the one who had discarded her, was now the one begging for attention. The hunter had become the supplicant. His obsession deepened with each unanswered email, each polite brush-off. It wasn't just about guilt. It was the dawning, terrifying recognition of what he had lost, and who she had become without him. It consumed him. Work at Knox Capital, his empire, no longer thrilled him. Deals that once gave him adrenaline rushes now felt tedious, insignificant. The glittering world he had constructed around himself, hollow. The people he used to revere, shallow. Sabine's constant chatter about influencers, events, and new collections grated on his nerves. Her world of curated appearances now felt cheap, desperate. He started seeing everything and everyone through Eleanor's eyes, and none of it measured up. He grew erratic. He lashed out at his partners, missed critical meetings. He would sit for hours at his desk, not working, just refreshing financial news sites and social media, hunting for any mention of Eleanor Winslow. And he found her, everywhere. Her face on the side of a Paris bus in a campaign for Eau d'Audace. Her quote in a column on female leadership, a candid photo in Le Figaro, walking along the Seine, head high, elegance in motion. She was a ghost, haunting his new life, a living monument to his greatest mistake. Finally, he couldn't take it. He needed to see her. The begging, the emails, all had failed, so he did what he had always done when he wanted something. He used power and money. He booked a private jet to Paris. He didn't tell Sabine where he was going. He checked into the presidential suite at the Ritz. Everything gleamed, gold trim, marble floors, velvet upholstery, but it all felt sterile, lifeless. From his window, he could see the Place Vendôme, and nestled among the famed jewelers was the shimmering flagship boutique of Lumiere. It felt like she was everywhere, watching him, daring him. His plan was simple, crude, desperate. He had his elite legal and financial team draft a proposal, an unsolicited and absurdly generous offer from Knox Capital to acquire a majority stake in Lumiere. The offer was so astronomically above market value that no board could ignore it. It was a battering ram, and he knew one thing with certainty. Eleanor Winslow, the face and architect of Lumiere's rebirth, would be in the room. She would have to be. It was the only way he could force a meeting. The offer sent ripples through the French business world. Lumiere was sacred, family-owned, fiercely independent, not for sale. But Gregory's proposal was too bold, too financially seductive to dismiss outright. A formal meeting was arranged. Jean-Luc Marchand would attend, so would his board, a gallery of Stoic aristocrats and seasoned executives. And as Gregory intended, so would Eleanor. The day of the meeting, he dressed with the precision of a soldier preparing for war. Charcoal Brioni suit, cufflinks like weapons, the armor of power. He crossed the Place Vendôme and entered Lumiere's historic headquarters. His face was unreadable. He was shown into a grand boardroom, wood-paneled walls, antique chandeliers, and a long table polished to a mirror shine. Jean-Luc and his board were already seated, stern, quiet, expectant. And at the far end of the table, silhouetted against the morning light streaming in from tall windows, was Eleanor. She rose as he entered. She wore a sapphire blue dress that sharpened the brilliance of her hazel eyes. She was composed, elegant, impossibly calm, and she looked at him not with contempt, not with pain, nor with victory. She regarded him with the detached curiosity of a scientist examining a long-extinct fossil. It was devastating. "Gregory," she said evenly. The first time she had spoken his name in months. "What a surprise," he managed, his voice thinner than he'd expected. "You look well." "I am well," she replied simply, gesturing to the chair across from her. "Please, let's not waste time on pleasantries." "You have an offer for us," she said, her tone level and clinical. What followed was a masterclass in humiliation. Gregory launched into his pitch: charts, projections, synergies, global market share. His voice carried all the polish and ferocity that had built Knox Capital into a titan. But beneath each word, a tremor lived. It wasn't in his voice, it was deeper, hidden beneath the veneer. For the first time, his charm felt like a costume he had outgrown. Every slide he presented, every confident turn of phrase was shadowed by the quiet weight of the woman across the room. But the words rang hollow, even to him. He was aware, painfully so, of Eleanor's presence. She didn't interrupt. She didn't flinch, she simply listened. Her hands calmly folded in front of her, occasionally giving the faintest nod to Jean-Luc Marchand, seated beside her, his face unreadable. When Gregory finished, a heavy silence settled. Then, Jean-Luc spoke. "Thank you for your presentation, Mr. Knox," he said coolly. "It is bold, just as your method for securing this meeting was." "I'm a bold man," Gregory replied, grasping for composure. Jean-Luc looked at Eleanor. She shook her head once, barely perceptible. "We appreciate the valuation you've placed on our house," Jean-Luc continued. "But Lumiere is not for sale." He let the words hang. "This is the legacy of my family, not an asset to be stripped and flipped for quarterly gain. Which, I believe, is your particular specialty." The jab cut deep. Gregory felt it. Jean-Luc stood. "If you'll excuse us, we have real business to attend to." The board members gathered their notes and filed out with brisk, elegant finality. Gregory remained alone at the table, defeated. Except, not entirely. Eleanor stayed. She rose and walked slowly to his end of the room. She stood before him, composed and poised. Her voice was soft when she spoke. "Was this what all of this was about, Gregory?" Her eyes searched his. "This performance? This corporate theater? Just to get my attention?" He couldn't meet her gaze. He looked down at his hands, resting uselessly on the table's polished surface. I had to see you," he said. "I saw you on television. I don't understand?" she cut in, her voice still gentle, but now threaded with steel. "What exactly don't you understand, Gregory? That the woman you once dismissed as dull built something of her own? That the woman you left for a glamorous shadow could lead an empire?" She leaned in slightly. "You don't understand because you never really saw me." Her words hit with precision, not out of cruelty but clarity. He flinched. "I made a mistake," he said quietly. She shook her head. "No, you didn't make a mistake. It was a choice. You chose what glittered over what endured. You chose a fantasy over a person." She stepped back, tall and resolute. "You didn't just leave me, Gregory. You left the part of yourself that still recognized quiet strength. The part that valued something deeper than numbers and noise." She walked slowly to the window, gazing down at the vibrant square below. "I was the curator of your life," Eleanor said, her voice calm. "I made it beautiful, seamless, so you could go out and play your games." She turned slightly, her profile illuminated by soft Parisian light. And you convinced yourself the curator was just part of the furniture. You forgot, she continued, her tone gaining quiet force, that she had her own thoughts, her own history, her own dreams. When she faced him again, there was a trace of the Eleanor he once knew, the gentle warmth, but now layered with something undeniable: strength, resilience. It made her radiant. "I want to thank you, Gregory," she said. He blinked. "Thank me?" "Yes," she nodded. "By casting me out, you set me free. You forced me to rediscover the woman I was before you, the one I buried for 2 decades. You thought you pushed me into the cold?" She smiled faintly. "But you actually pushed me into the sun." She stepped to a side table and lifted a single, elegant bottle of Eau d'Audace. "This is my life now," she said. "I'm building something with soul, something that will endure." She paused. "What are you building, Gregory? Another shell company? Another hollow monument to your ego?" He had no response. For the first time, he felt stripped bare. His suits, his fortune, his bravado, none of it shielded him from her unflinching truth. He had come for a confrontation, but the war had ended before it began. She had won, back in that modest Stamford hotel room. "I want you back," he said suddenly. The words were clumsy, bare, real. A sad smile touched her lips. "The person you want doesn't exist anymore," she said gently. "And the woman I am now, she'd never choose you. You see, I finally have a life that's not boring, and I have no intention of giving it up." She placed the bottle gently in front of him, a final, fragrant dismissal. "Goodbye, Gregory." And with that, she walked out of the boardroom, her heels echoing in the silence. She didn't look back. He sat frozen in the ornate chair, surrounded by antique wood, burnished gold, and nothing but the scent of audace and the bitter sting of regret. He had thrown away the woman he called boring, but today he had seen her on the world stage, and now he understood. He hadn't just lost a wife. He had lost his compass, his conscience, the only person who had ever truly seen him. And he'd been too blind, too arrogant to see her, until it was far, far too late. Eleanor's story is a powerful reminder. A person's worth is not defined by someone else's opinion. It lies in the quiet strength we cultivate and the courage to begin again, no matter how late. Gregory Knox learned the hard way that power, glamour, and wealth mean little without soul. Eleanor Winslow didn't just get revenge, she got a life. A brilliant, bold, authentic life of her own. So the story is over. Our wonderful friends, are you still here at this hour? If you are, then maybe, just maybe, something in Eleanor's journey has quietly touched a part of your own. And if that's true, then I hope you'll sit with me just a bit longer. Let's look at what this really means together. Eleanor Winslow's story is not just about betrayal and revenge. It's about rediscovery. It's about the power that lies dormant in so many of us, the part we bury beneath expectations, behind roles we've been told to play. For 20 years she was silent so someone else could roar, but when her world fell apart, she didn't crumble. She rose, quietly, boldly, with grace sharpened by pain. That's the message. Maybe you've been dismissed, overlooked, told you were too quiet, too soft, or simply not enough. Maybe someone walked away thinking they left you with nothing. But as Eleanor shows us, what they couldn't take was your soul. The great poet Mary Oliver once asked, "Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life?" Eleanor's answer? She chose not revenge, but rebirth. She teaches us that our worth doesn't disappear just because someone fails to see it. As Viktor Frankl said, when we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. That change is not easy, but it's possible. So wherever you are right now, whether you're grieving, healing, or just wondering, know this: you are not forgotten. You are not dull. You are not done. You are only just beginning. If this story meant something to you, if it gave you hope, made you think, or stirred a memory, please don't keep it to yourself. Like, share, and subscribe. Not just for us, but for someone out there who might need this story right now. And if you're still here at this hour, then maybe, just maybe, it's your time to begin again.